Story 1. There are many episodes of Bluey, but one in particular stood out to me. In this episode, their estranged aunt comes to visit. Without explicitly stating it, you realize that she can't have children herself, which explains why she has stayed away all this time. It's quite heart-wrenching. Story 2. Movie, not show, but Puss in Boots, when the guards find his catnip and he says it's for his glaucoma. Since there seems to be some confusion, I'm not referring to Shrek 2. I'm referring to Puss in Boots, released in 2011. Here is the scene: one bottle of catnip. Story 3. Hey Arnold had some surprising serious content. The episode about his neighbor being in America specifically to find out what happened to the daughter he gave to evacuating American troops at the end of the Vietnam War was unexpected. Story 4. Grandpa's rental movie and Rugrats. Sexy vixens from outer space, but that's for when you go to bed, or something like that. Story 5. That scene in SpongeBob where he watches a sea anemone dance on the screen and frantically switches it off when Gary walks in? Tell me that's not the underwater version of getting caught watching inappropriate content. He even stammers, "I was just looking for the sports channel." As a kid, it's just funny that the snail walks in. As an adult, he's one click away from incognito mode. Story 6. Snippets of adult conversation in Bluey, such as discussing vasectomy, explore themes of loss, infertility, and even an entire episode showcasing the evolution leading up to parenthood. It touches on watching your child leave home and ultimately dying and reuniting with your own parents in heaven. For a show targeting 5-year-olds, they really keep it interesting for the adults. Story 7. Rocco's Modern Life had many adult jokes. Story 8. It's interesting that there are two different definitions of adult being used in this discussion. Some responses mention shows that explore deeper topics and themes but in a child-appropriate way. Others use adult to signify material that is not suitable for children. It's also fascinating how many of these shows from both categories I grew up watching. Story 9. The Road to El Dorado. At one point in the movie, it appears that one of the characters is receiving attention from the female lead. Story 10. From The Incredibles, Bob's exchange with the tricycle kid. "Well, what are you waiting for?" "I don't know, something amazing, I guess." "Me too, kid. It gets me every time in my adulthood. That film never gets old." Story 11. The episode where SpongeBob gets stuck in a strange, eerie town at night reflects the unsettling feeling of being lost in an unfamiliar, potentially dangerous place. An experience that resonates differently as you grow older. Story 12. The episode of Bluey where they teach the kids that their mom needs a break from them, but she still loves them very much. That was quite profound. Story 13. Adventure Time tackles some significant themes. BMO's growing up episode is quite good. Finn also loses an arm and learns to cope with that. Story 14. There is a lesser-known children's show called Erie, Indiana that was produced by Joe Dante, known for Gremlins. It follows a boy named Marshall who moves to a strange town called Erie, Indiana and explores the peculiar phenomena in the area with his best friend, Simon. Most episodes contain oddly depressing themes or adult topics hidden beneath their zany premises. My favorite episode, Heart on a Chain, is about a girl who moves to town and immediately becomes entangled in a love triangle between Marshall and another friend. The girl has a serious heart condition but is at the top of the donor list for a new heart. Tragedy strikes when the boy Marshall has been in a friendly rivalry with is hit by a car and dies in front of him. His heart is then given to the girl. Strange events unfold when Marshall tries to pursue the girl, and her heart literally begins to break and causes her pain. It becomes a metaphor for losing someone and feeling guilty for trying to move on. Marshall must confront her, explaining that he is also traumatized by the death, but one cannot live in grief because she was given a new lease on life. It's not her fault that his heart is keeping her alive. That's just life, and she can't carry that debt forever. The episode concludes with the girl deciding to avoid him and a shot of a cherub statue on the boy's grave shedding a single tear. Many episodes of Erie, Indiana explore themes like child abuse and neglect in very intriguing ways. The character Simon strongly hints at experiencing abuse and neglect at home, leading Marshall's family to treat him as one of their own. It's a sweet gesture. Story 15. None of this stuff compares to the very special episodes we used to see on family sitcoms. Arnold, along with his friend Dudley, is targeted by a man who owns a local bike shop and has sexually abused children in the past. Arnold's would-be abuser is arrested after Arnold confides in his father. Yes, it is important to prepare kids to protect themselves from serious issues, but some of those frightening topics were hard to think about as a young child. Story 16. There is an entire episode of SpongeBob where he and Patrick curse excessively throughout the episode titled Sailor Mouth. Story 17. Invader Zim is a show that arguably should not be labeled as suitable for young children. It is an excellent series that premiered when I was around 17, but it feels more appropriate as an adult cartoon than one for younger audiences. Additionally, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac exemplifies true adult content, and it was quite extreme. Story 18. The dinosaur show ends with the meteor strike, and the replies provide a clearer explanation of the actual ending. Story 19. iCarly. They were looking into the woods with binoculars. Carly. Look at those cute little squirrels playing. Freddy. I don't think they're playing. Carly, after a long pause. Oh. Story 20. The part where Jim Henson's dinosaurs turned to the camera and stated that crime occurs due to wealth inequality arising from private ownership of the means of production during a parody of police shows. Story 21. Jimmy Smits appeared on Pee-wee's Playhouse as Jimmy Wilson, the conky repairman. In his role, he shows up to help Miss Yvonne, who has a keen interest in the large wrench in his pocket. He confirms the size of the wrench and emphasizes the importance of hiring someone with the right tool and knowledge of how to use it. I'm recalling this from memory, but that was the essence of the scene. Story 22. Many of the one-liners in Bugs Bunny are memorable. I watched it as a child and saw it again as an adult, and I couldn't believe my mom let me watch that. Story 23. The episode of Bluey where Chili mentions that she and Aunt Trixie used to go to the lookout to think had me laughing nonstop. Story 24. In Frozen 2, when Anna and Kristoff are in the sled, they tell the reindeer to keep going so they can kiss. At the end of the movie, Anna tells Kristoff that she prefers him in leather. Story 25. SpongeBob refers to Mrs. Puff inappropriately and implies a derogatory remark by saying, "See you next Tuesday." I learned the meaning of that phrase from the television series Sex and the City. Story 26. I saw a joke in Boss Baby where they said they would put an orphan baby with a Mormon family because they would not even notice an extra child. It's humorous because children typically would not know anything about Mormon families usually having many kids, so it was clearly intended for adults watching. Story 27. Surprised nobody has mentioned The Amazing World of Gumball yet. The very upbeat song about how the economy is struggling and we are all in a difficult situation springs immediately to mind. Story 28. Opening scene of Pixar's Incredibles, where the man jumps off the building because he is trying to end his life. Story 29. I think there was an episode of Cow and Chicken, where a group of biker girls invaded their house and started munching on the carpet. The whole thing was a joke about lesbians. Story 30. Adventure Time. I Remember You. I guess spoilers just in case. That episode really addresses how badly dementia can affect loved ones. For how surreal that show can be at times, it truly explores some more mature themes. It's still well worth a watch, even though it has 10 seasons and 2 additional shows. Story 31. Gargoyles had an entire episode focused on a father summoning death, represented by Anubis, to bring his son back to life. Throughout the episode, the father and Anubis engaged in a conversation about the fairness of death, its consequences, and its necessity for life. For a children's show, it was a very mature conversation. Story 32. Jim Henson created a television movie called Dog City, which was a 1930s gangster film featuring a cast of dogs. In it, the lead gangster's girlfriend taunts the heroine dog by saying, "I've seen you doing tricks on street corners, jumping through hoops for a quarter and catching frisbees for a dime." As a child, I did not understand that this was wordplay implying the heroine was a prostitute. The heroine almost says, She will be the hero's girlfriend before Ralph stops her with, "Welcome to family programming, folks." Story 33. The SpongeBob episode where he and Mr. Krabs think they killed the health inspector features a long list of brilliantly written adult references, and that one always stood out to me as particularly dark. Story 34. There was a scene in Mulan that I didn't get as a child. It was when the Huns captured two soldiers from the Chinese army and instructed them to go back and tell the general that the Huns were on their way. When the soldiers started running, one of the Huns asked the other, "How many people does it take to bring a message?" The other one took his arrow and bow and answered, "Just one." After watching the movie for the 47th time, I suddenly realized they killed him. Story 35. The Adventures of Mark Twain, 1985 clay animation. They meet the devil, and it quickly becomes existential and dark. Story 36. Ralph Bakshi created a Mighty Mouse cartoon in which Mighty Mouse snorts a pile of cocaine. Bakshi claimed it was powdered flower petals from Mighty Mouse's girlfriend, who ran a flower shop, but there was no context to support this, and the show was canceled. Story 37. It's not the most mature topic, but it can be a little annoying as a parent. Lucas the Spider features a lot of discussions about bottoms, wiggly bottoms, bubble bottoms, stinky bottoms, and so on. I had to explain to my 5-year-old that she can't just call people wiggly butt or stinky butt in public. Story 38. This might not have made it outside the United Kingdom, but there was a film about the pop group S Club 7. One of the pop stars goes into her bag to look for something and accidentally produces a toy. The film was rated U for unclassified, meaning there is nothing even vaguely risque in it and it is totally suitable for children. I assume the censor watching the film just didn't recognize what the object was. Story 39. Boy Meets World featured an episode about a teenager being abused by her alcoholic father and an episode about a teacher sexually harassing his students. Story 40. The Disney Tarzan movie has some dark moments. In the first 15 minutes, two gorilla parents witness their child being eaten by a leopard, and the fresh corpses of Tarzan's parents lie on a bloody claw-marked floor near their newborn baby. Additionally, Tarzan tosses aside the corpse of the leopard he just killed. The climax of the movie features Clayton's corpse swinging by the neck. Story 41. I remember an episode of Pinky and the Brain where Brain gets a job at an office. They throw a big sexual harassment book at him when he is hired to go over the rules. Story 42. In Steven Universe. The future, when Steven goes to the hospital, everything said is accurate to real life. Story 43. I believe most 1990s cartoons were animated projects that were toned down because the new children's networks were the primary platform for creators. Story 44. Teen Titans lecturing some lesser-known children's show villains on how to maximize their retirement savings. I must admit that's also where I began to get interested in 401k plans. Well, a children's show just highlighted my lack of financial literacy. I better address that. Story 45. That's a hard one. I grew up in the Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life era. Thinking about it, in the episode where Ren and Stimpy interact with the electric fence, there was an implication that Stimpy and Ren's cousin were about to have an inappropriate encounter in Stimpy's litter box, but the audience couldn't watch and they shut the door. Story 46. Last of the Star Makers episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog. Loss, grief, love, and hope. I can't watch that episode without crying. Story 47. You need to find the triangle-shaped bush. Then just press the button for a special surprise. Story 48. This goes way back, but in 1983, one of the actors on Sesame Street, Mr. Will Lee, who played Mr. Harold Hooper, died. He was one of the first human actors on the show. His character ran Hooper's store, a convenience store where actors and Muppets interacted. When Lee died, instead of recasting him or saying he moved away, the producers of the show decided to have the character die. They spent a lot of time and research on how to approach the concept of death to children. They even broadcast the episode announcing his death on Thanksgiving Day because they wanted to ensure children were not alone when watching it. It was, and still is, an incredibly emotional episode. Story 49. Fragile Rock when the Fraggles get stuck in a cave, and Wembley tells them that soon they are going to run out of oxygen and die. Story 50. Adventure Time. from bad to worse. At one point, Jake becomes a zombie and bites Lady Rainicorn, turning her into a zombie. By the end of the episode, everyone is cured, and Jake apologizes to her for biting her earlier. In Korean, Lady responds that it's okay because she likes it when he bites her. Jake blushes. They were able to get away with this, I think, because they never added subtitles for Lady. In other episodes, she would also say some really dark things. Story 51. There are countless adult jokes in Ed, Edd and Eddy. Eddy finds a magazine under Ed's pillow called Chicks Galore. He gets excited until he sees a baby chicken on the page. Eddy has some magazines hidden under his bed called Jiggy Jiggy and Chicks, complete with wadded-up tissues. There's a whole episode dedicated to Eddy hiding his stash of magazines. It's never directly stated that they are adult magazines. Early in the episode, Eddy whispers to Double D, "Luckily, I was able to save the magazines." Later on, the magazines end up in the sewer. Double D tells Eddy that the text is basically unreadable due to being submerged in whatever is in the sewer. Eddy's response is, "It's the pictures I'm worried about. What's winter without a snow job? Sockhead. Get it? Snow job. Eddy. I'm an Oedipus, 'cause I'm Ed." Eddy pulls a bra out of a dresser drawer and yells, "Woohoo! PG-13. Ed says, "That's my mom's." Eddy couldn't drop the bra fast enough. The movie features a very in-your-face joke. Double D explains what a sextant is. Of course, Eddy gets a kick out of it enough that he makes Double D repeat it, pretending he didn't fully understand what was being said. Eventually, Ed catches on to the joke and starts laughing. Initially, Double D looks confused about what the other two are laughing about. He looks like he's going to be sick once he puts two and two together. There's an episode where a boomerang changes the personality of whoever is holding it. Double D gets a hold of the boomerang and removes every piece of clothing except for his hat. At one point, he spins around a lamppost like he's dancing at a club. Story 52. In the episode of Gargoyles, Broadway accidentally shoots their detective friend because she left her loaded gun unsecured while having guests over. Story 53. Do you think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he has created here on earth? Spy Kids 2. Story 54. There is a whole series of Sesame Street episodes made for military families, including what to do if a loved one is deployed and what happens if they never come back. Story 55. SpongeBob, where the character is living through his mundane 9-to-5 job, and at the end, his wife asks, "Are you coming to bed, honey?" Story 56. That episode of SpongeBob where Squidward goes to Tentacle Acres and lives his dream life illustrates a genuine phenomenon that often affects people who achieve their goals. He quickly becomes depressed from reaching his aspirations and wishes for some adversity in his life again, wanting to live next to SpongeBob. When individuals build their lives around specific goals, they may feel lost or empty once those goals are achieved, as if their lives come to a halt. Studies show that Olympic gold medalists have higher suicide rates than those who win silver or bronze. Story 57. Peanuts. Adults often say things that make no sense, but sometimes you can understand the meaning through their tone. Story 58. Rocco was a phone sex worker for a brief period in one episode. Ren and Stimpy had an entire episode about Stimpy's addiction to masturbation. Story 59. The entirety of The Brave Little Toaster, specifically when the flower dies of loss and loneliness after seeing its reflection in the toaster. Story 60. SpongeBob and Sandy are forbidden to do karate together, which makes them think about nothing but wanting to practice karate together. Story 61. The Mother's Day episode of Rugrats features Chucky trying to find someone to be his mom. He discovers a box of his mother's belongings that his dad asked Dee Dee to keep because it was too painful. Chucky finds a picture of her and shows it to his dad, who then sits with him and shares memories about his mom before she passed away. My husband and I watched it and we were both crying. Story 62. In the United Kingdom, we had a nightly show called John Craven's News Round, later known simply as News Round after John moved on. It was a 5 to 7 minute digest of global news stories, whether good, bad, or lighthearted. that explained the world and current events to children. It was a hugely important show, often overlooked as a classic. From war and famine to terrorism and natural disasters, nothing was off limits, but everything was explained to children in an engaging manner using language they could understand. Story 63, Titans from 2003 features the episode Haunted, where Robin pursues Slade, later revealed to be a manifestation of his mind caused by a chemical agent. Slade almost beats Robin to the point of death, leading Robin to turn against his friends, who do not believe him since they witnessed Slade's apparent death. This episode represents themes of obsession and post-traumatic stress disorder. Another episode, Truck, addresses issues of racism. Story 64, Gumball, where his parents are sitting in the doctor's office finding out Nicole is pregnant, and then she is pregnant at their wedding. The happy, happy, joy, joy song. I told you I would shoot, but you didn't believe me. Why didn't you believe me? Story 65. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood featured a scene in the train park, though I don't remember the name. Two characters wore t-shirts with overlapping letters that spelled a word intentionally. I have never been able to find the scene online. Story 66. In Bugs Bunny, The Greyhounded Hare, 1949, the track announcer says, "The dogs are going into their starting boxes. Now they're on edge for this race. Bill's bunion looks a little sore. Bride's biscuit is hard as a rock." Story 67. Back in the 1990s, the group 20 Fingers performed the adult song Short Dick Man on the iconic Brazilian children's show Suxa, while the lead singer belted out, "Innie, weenie, teeny, weenie shriveled, little, short dick man." All the children and their parents in attendance were clapping along and having a great time, apparently not understanding the English lyrics. Not sure what Suxa's excuse was since she does seem to know English. Story 68. That would be the giant talking clitoris from the 1990s children's show Plasmo. Story 69. Pinky and the Brain had an episode where Brain participates in a nicotine study and becomes addicted to cigarettes. When he goes to the company to complain, they hire him as their mascot, Brainy the Elf, to promote cigarettes to children. Story 70. In many old animations, there are jokes or double-meaning suggestions that you do not notice until you grow up, watch those cartoons again, and understand them. Story 71. There are many subtle rude jokes in kids' shows, so to change the pace, I nominate the episode of Messi Goes to Okido, where Messi runs against Mayor Oki with the slogan, "Make Okido Great Again." Story 72. My son watches Spidey and his amazing friends. One of the main villains is Zola. In the Marvel Universe, he is essentially a Nazi scientist who performed inhumane experiments. He also brought back Hitler, which seems like an odd character choice for a kids' show. So far in the series, he simply steals Halloween treats using mind control. Story 73. I just wanted to mention the remark Link makes in the Zelda cartoon about Zelda's cleavage. However, these comments are quite dark. Story 74. People have mentioned most of the ones I can think of, but there is one thing I had seen recently. It's from a teen/tween episode of Creeped Out titled Marty. The first time I watched it, I thought I would see a new age version of Goosebumps, or Are You Afraid of the Dark? I was not prepared. A girl receives a new smartphone to fit in and become more popular. You think, oh, another one of those stories cautioning you to be true to yourself. The phone's version of a personal assistant helps the girl become popular, but then it starts to get controlling, making threats and doing harmful things when she doesn't obey. I initially thought, oh, okay, crazy artificial intelligence. We've seen it before. No, we haven't seen this one before. This wasn't the usual crazy AI story. You were witnessing an abusive and toxic relationship developing, starting from love bombing to isolation and abuse. It took her friends stepping in to help her break away from the toxic relationship. In the end, you see the girl about to return to it. Story 75. That one episode of The Smurfs where each character was trying to get Smurfette included Papa Smurf trying to win her over as well. Yuck. Story 76. Suxa wore hot pants everywhere and thigh-high boots. I didn't care that I couldn't understand a word of Portuguese. Story 77. I had to Google to confirm this really happened. In a G.I. Joe episode, a female Cobra soldier refers to a cadet as a blind panty waist. Story 78. Pepe Le Pew's blatant harassment of any female feline who crosses his path is intolerable. I can no longer watch them. Story 79. Patrick is holding Squidward after he was shrunk by the shrink ray. Squidward says, "I wonder if a fall from this height is enough to kill me." Story 80. In the DuckTales reboot, there is an episode with several Die Hard references, including Donald at one point screaming, "Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon." This is an obvious reference to the infamous television version of that line. Story 81. Puss in Boots. Humpty, do you know what they do to eggs in San Ricardo prison? I can tell you, it's not over easy. Story 82. Probably any of the classic Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes cartoons. They contain a lot of adult humor that went over children's heads. Story 83. The whole Muppets series that aired on ABC for about a year was written for adults. In one episode, they go out for karaoke, and the next morning they are all hungover. I loved that series and wish it had caught on. Story 84. I remember many things from when I was a kid. The real Ghostbusters was full of adult jokes and situations. There's an episode where they go up against Cthulhu, titled Collect Call of Cthulhu, and another one where Egon turns into a chicken and lays an egg. Of course, there was also the nightmare fuel of the Boogeyman and Samhain. As an adult, the Boogeyman is still one of the scariest-looking creatures to come out of children's entertainment, but Samhain looks genuinely cool. Story 85. I remember an old post on Reddit about a Danish animated show where a man pokes a mermaid's exposed chest. Story 86. Rocco, working as a phone sex operator in Rocco's Modern Life, is memorable. The first 10 minutes of Up are also impactful. Story 87. I remember watching The Cat in the Hat in theaters, and when he made the inappropriate joke, every parent in that entire theater started eyeing each other. Story 88. So many moments are hard to name just one. However, the episode of Bluey titled Baby Race definitely comes to mind, especially those last few moments when Coco's mom tells Chili that she is doing great, and then a minute later when Bingo says that Bluey must have seen something she really wanted, as we see baby Bluey reach up for her mom. I'm getting all teary-eyed. Story 89. Remember seeing a Twin Peaks sketch on Sesame Street about a town with bird characters who had double beaks. Story 90. That time Broadway accidentally shot Detective Elisa Mazza with her own gun midway through the first season of Disney's 1994 cinematic masterpiece Gargoyles. Story 91. Anything from Rocco's Modern Life, the scene where they milk heifer is the one that stood out the most for me. Story 92. The Sarah Jane Adventures story, The Curse of Clyde Langer, featured a mature and moving depiction of homelessness, which I thought was handled better than in many adult shows. Story 93. That one episode of Sesame Street featured the word of the day, anxious. They referenced the horror movie Seven, and a character was anxious about what was in a box, asking, "What's in the box? What's in the box?" I was impressed by how they incorporated that. Story 94. There's an episode of Teletubbies where the vacuum cleaner is interacting with the purple character for an extended period. Story 95. Research the Brazilian children's show Hostess Suxa, particularly in the 1990s. Avoid searching for this at work. Story 96. I don't know if Tuca and Birdie is considered a children's show, but when it took a turn and Birdie started talking about her childhood trauma, I genuinely gasped. Story 97. My kids were watching a cartoon, but I can't remember which one, where girls were discussing their periods. I changed the channel. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.